And now, Legal Insights with Gus and Astapulo Law Firm.
Eyewitnesses can forget. Cell phone records, not so much. In distracted driving cases, digital data often tells the real story and proves what human memory cannot. Let's welcome back attorney and founder of the Gus and Astapulo Law Firm. Gus, it's good to see you again.
Layla, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so why is human testimony not always reliable?
You know, Layla, crashes create chaos, right?
Yeah.
And so eyewitnesses, ultimately they could give a perfectly honest answer, but it just may not be accurate. Memories fade over time. The stress and adrenaline of it may distort some of the memories as well. And so ultimately, in how somebody's going to fare under cross-examination if it goes that far, it can shape how a case turns. And so really eyewitness testimony can be not the most reliable at times.
So what does cell phone data actually show?
So the first thing, especially let's talk about distracted driving cases, for example. So main thing we're looking for is active use. And so it can show your activity, whether you're logged in, whether you're scrolling, whether you're swiping. It can show all of that, and most importantly, it timestamps it to when you were active on that app or in use. And so it helps create a digital timeline for the events surrounding an accident.
Really? Okay, so someone who has, let's say, because now we have cell phone laws where you're not allowed to hold the cell phone in your hand, so you have to have it propped or put away, right? So you can still use your cell phone for maps. So as a GPS source, you can still use your phone for that. But a lot of times people, they want to select their music. Sometimes it plays off of their phone. So you can actually track that data, and once that data is extracted, it will tell the full story of what you're doing when you were doing it.
Absolutely, and I'll give you a great example. We had a case recently where the defendant driver testified under oath, I wasn't texting and driving at the time of the accident. And so ultimately we got a forensic download of his phone. The phone showed an outgoing text message immediately 2 minutes before impact, followed by his Apple activity health log showed steps. So you had text, impact, steps, and we were able to get the time of impact from the vehicle data.
Oh.
And so and from that we were able to create a very clear timeline of to establish he was texting and driving.
So do most modern cars now have kind of like that black box type of thing where you can extract data of when there was impact or something else going on?
Most have that now, and it doesn't even just stop at that. It shows braking patterns. It can show whether your Bluetooth was connected. It can show whether your windows were up or down. So it's very, very extensive.
Very granular information. That's impressive, but it also gives you pause. You want to really make sure that you're abiding by all the laws and watching the road like you should be when you're driving. Is there any instance where cell phone data, it tells the full story, however, it works in someone's favor? I mean, not just in the client who was maybe injured as a result of someone else who was using it, but is there any room for mistake?
Absolutely. In certain times, it can, just like it can prove somebody was texting and driving or using, it can prove that they were not texting and driving.
Right.
And so it really works both ways.
Okay. And why do juries trust data more than people?
So juries appreciate clarity, right? And we talked about eyewitness testimony and how they may fall under scrutiny at trial, and create a messy timeline and not very clear on what they saw. The data is the data. It doesn't lie, and ultimately jurors tend to go with the more reasonable explanation for what it is. And so I've seen it, and it's hard to argue with and won't be subject to cross-examination.
Yeah. So data is a very neutral part of the process. How has this changed modern litigation?
Ultimately, lawyers really need to understand the data, and not so much that it exists, but what specifically they need to ask for and what specifically they need to preserve. Because ultimately, when the data over time, it may overwrite itself or somebody may delete it. So it's important that you notify the individual whose phone it is and also the cell phone carrier, telling them what all needs to be preserved so that, if it comes time to it, you can use your subpoena power or whatever and get the necessary materials to establish your case.
Well, that was going to lead into my next question. So how difficult or easy is it to obtain that data?
You know, you typically, so it's all generally through subpoena power with court oversight.
Right.
You're not going to get carte blanche of everything in somebody's phone, and so typically it's going to be limited to the data that's relevant to the accident and the events directly leading up to it.
What if it was a case where, you know, someone, yes, may have been scrolling, but the reason for the accident was they sneezed or had a coughing fit or something. It was something that was more medical related that caused a potential accident, but you've got the data that shows that that could have been the possible. How do you decipher? It's a very thin line there.
Ultimately, so that there's that digital forensics experts. I mean, I've had that exact scenario where there was Apple Health activity, and they said, oh, well, you know, maybe the phone rattled in the car, but, you know, I don't know how that explains movement of 30 feet, which was what the data here showed.
Right.
So ultimately, to be able to prove that or dispute it, it's going to come through digital forensics experts. We work with them regularly, and so it's, you know, it's a advanced technology in its new space that didn't exist 10 years ago, and it's interesting and also very, very important.
It's quite new, you say, within the last 10 years. That's not that long ago.
No.
That's incredible. All right, for people who want more information about your law firm, where should they go?
They can find us online, guslawsc.com, or they can give us a call, 843-310-5555.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Gus.
Thanks, Layla.
We'll be back in 2 minutes.
This has been Legal Insights with Gus and Astapulo Law Firm.